If we are going to grow as disciples of Jesus Christ, we need to grow simply as humans as well, in our self-awareness, in our ability to communicate and relate to others, and so much more. We call that human formation, and that's what we're going to be talking about today on Ignition. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, and we want to set your faith ablaze so that you might live the adventure that comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Before we get into today's topic, we want you to know that we love listener feedback. So if you've got questions about today's episode, or if you have ideas for future episodes, please contact us. The easiest way to do so is by email, and the address is ignition@sfcatholic.org. I am joined in studio today by a recurring but occasional guest co-host, Emily Leedom.
Hello, Dr. Berg.
How are you, Emily?
It's a delight to be back on.
It's been a couple months. I think like November, December is the last time you were on the show.
I think so too.
It's good to have you back. So in case folks weren't listening then or previously, who are you?
My name is Emily Leedom. I often call myself a daughter of the Diocese of Sioux Falls because I really received immense formation and really experienced a conversion to the faith in and through the offerings that the diocese and people within the diocese were offering, that they were supporting me with. So I am not so newly
Leedom.
8 months-ish, but who's counting, the executive director of Catholic Family Services for the Diocese of Sioux Falls, which primarily we're a counseling clinic, but also offer a lot of programming and that kind of thing, specifically addressing human formation. So as you're reading the intro for today, my ears are perked.
Yes, they are.
Because, it's definitely a desire for me. I'm also married, and I've got 2 little girls and one on the way.
And one on the way, in case people are watching the video. They're like, I'm guessing.
Wow, she's like really eating a lot of donuts this Lent.
Yes. No,
but actually, I am. I've been craving chocolate shakes. I'm really working on it.
Really? No, yesterday
you all the time.
Can I ask what you gave up for Lent?
I didn't necessarily give up something. I've added some things. Yeah, I changed where I park.
Shakes and donuts and.
Yeah, I've added shakes and donuts and an earlier bedtime. Oh gosh, that's funny. No, I had gotten out of the habit when I switched roles. I used to stop in the cathedral every morning on my way in, or at least most mornings. And I started parking in a different place. And I tell you, I had the clearest intentions and biggest desires to continue. Okay, I'll drop my stuff off, and then eventually I'll make my way over and stop in the cathedral for a little while, just to spend some time with the Blessed Sacrament, in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. And it was not happening. It was absolutely not happening. So for Lent, I started parking in my old parking spot and am getting back on the bandwagon.
Wow, that's cool.
I've changed my parking spot. I like to say. I mean, the deeper thing is I'm spending more time with the Blessed Sacrament.
But for Lent, I changed my parking spot.
But the practical piece is I changed my parking spot.
Those little practical things can make all the difference sometimes.
They really do. They really do. Yeah,
Amen.
Those little human behavior things.
Yep.
It's funny.
So, speaking of human behaviors... human formation. So just to set the stage for folks, in the Diocese of Sioux Falls, we've been talking for a long time about, as we're trying to grow as disciples of Jesus Christ, missionary disciples, the 4 areas of formation that JP2, St. John Paul II, originally applied to seminary formation. We've adapted that for all of us. So intellectual formation, the teachings of the church, scripture, catechism, that sort of thing. Spiritual formation, our prayer, our relationship with the Lord, personal prayer, sacraments, liturgy, and so on. Pastoral or apostolic formation, how I walk with people closer to Jesus Christ, lead them as a missionary, as an evangelist. But then human formation is the 4th one. And I think, Emily, my experience, when you're talking about human formation, and I thought, like, how do I want to describe it? So I just came up with a couple of things to start the show. But I think this is maybe the most nebulous one of the 4. Like, I think people can pretty quickly wrap their minds around what human or apostolic, spiritual, and intellectual formation are, but human not as much.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you
pillar.
What?
The forgotten pillar.
Nice.
I often think of it as that. Yeah.
So how do you describe the forgotten pillar, aka human formation?
Yeah. So I think primarily the thing that comes to my mind. And I knew you were going to ask me for a great definition. I should have just written one down, and I didn't. But when I think of human formation, I think of those human virtues, not necessarily the supernatural virtues or charisms, as some people might call them, those human virtues that allow us to flourish in the world, in our relationships, in our own personal growth, those human behaviors, if you will, that set us up for flourishing, that ultimately set us up for happiness, which leads to a greater capacity for holiness as well.
Amen. So with that, I think you and I, maybe you more than me, often refer to a beautiful quote from an early church father, Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, modern day France, who said that the glory of God is the human being fully alive. And there's this principle in the church that the grace we receive through the sacraments, through our relationship with God, builds on nature.
Grace builds on nature.
So we have to attend to our nature, our humanity, if we're going to become holy. So healthiness, the healthier I am, the holier I can become.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. The example that has been coming to my mind, and this is just it's a little too close to home right now, but we cannot be truly holy, we cannot be truly well if we eat terribly every day. If we eat a slice of pizza every night at 10 p.m., that's actually inhibiting us. It's inhibiting our humanness from being able to really receive or really to be fully alive, to be well. And of course, there's, I always want to make the distinction as we start to get into these things, because there's external suffering or suffering that we don't choose, and then the suffering that we bring on ourselves. And so really the aim for human formation is to free ourselves of the burdens that we attach to ourselves. So that we can flourish in the world, so that we can show up, if you will. That's kind of like a common phrase in a lot of self-help spheres right now. How can you show up best for the people in your life? How do you show up for the life that you want to live, or whatever? Which is kind of obnoxious because it's all over the place, but there's a real truth underlying it of how do we enter into the world and show up for it well with our best selves, bringing forward everything that God has created us to be, and allowing those things to spill out and be his light in the world. So
there's a lot of things that you just mentioned that I will touch on, but I was starting near the end, though, because I think so self-help and a number of things that we might get into. Some people might listen to that and be like, that's all kind of psychobabble, is it? Like, what does that have to do with my prayer life, with going to the Mass? Sort of the traditional things people think of when they think about discipleship or when they think about being Catholic. Isn't it like, you want to put me on the couch? I want to go to confession. Like, what do you say to that sort of like skeptical question?
Right. Oh man, that's a really good question. I think the first thing that I would say is going back to the grace building on nature conversation that we started with, that if we really want to become holy, if we really want to enter more fully into prayer, life in the Spirit, all of these things, again, that grace is building upon the very nature of our mind, our body, our behaviors, our personalities, our emotions. We can't separate. Sometimes we want to separate kind of that psycho-babble or the psychological component of the human person from the spiritual component of the human person. And you simply can't. It's a false dichotomy to try and we're not severed human beings, right? We're unified, integrated. We're unified and integrated human beings. And so those things can't be separated. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing that I would say is, this is going to sound a little harsher than I intended. But look around at maybe some people in your community, in your life, etc., that are dynamically faithful, very holy, are showing up to Mass every single day, are just really committed, right? Committed to the faith. If they have poor human formation, is it attractive to other people?
Right. No.
A huge part of what human formation is, and the importance of human formation, why it's a key pillar, for example, in this really started out for priests, these 4 areas of formation. They were laying them out for the formation of our priests. And they started to realize that without good human formation, priests are not relatable. They're not engaging. They're not actually inviting people into an encounter with the true presence of Jesus Christ, fully God and fully man, fully human. So there's that, I think there's that dynamic of why I push the importance of human formation, especially for those that are, well, for all, but for those that are really, really captivated by the spiritual life and are really invested in the spiritual life. If we can be a bridge rather than an obstacle for other people to encounter that, it makes all the difference in the world in the evangelical spirit, in our ability to evangelize.
So that's why for me, when I'm talking about human formation, I often, one of the things that I do usually emphasize, name is the ability to relate to other people. Now that doesn't mean that you and I are both pretty strong extroverts. We're exuberant and gregarious personalities.
Something like that.
Not everybody's called. No. Not everybody is called to. Not everybody's an extrovert. And that's okay. That really, that's how God has made us.
Human formation does not mean extroverted and outgoing at all. It actually just means virtuous. I mean, some of the most beautifully humanly formed people that I think excel, that I think of that excel in human formation, are actually very receptive people. They actually are maybe a bit quieter. They are observers in an environment kind of thing. On the other hand, you can have people that are extraordinarily boisterous, loud, tenacious in some ways, but don't have great human formation. They don't have that ability to listen or to reciprocate or I want to write a book someday about human formation. And I think my first chapter is going to be called, I just made this up, but it's kind of a good book idea. The first chapter would be The Art of Conversation. Yeah. A really good example of human formation. How do you have conversation well? How do you engage well? You do this so beautifully. Like, you were one of the first people that I was like, this is what the art of conversation is. Because you're receptive and you ask questions and you're curious, you're an interviewer, but you also bring forward things. That's a human formation skill.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard of Mortimer Adler? Does that name ring any bells for you?
Not like the psychologist Adler.
No, he's different guy, philosopher, Aristotelian philosopher. Won't get into all that. But he ran the University of Chicago's Great Books program for years. So he was very astute philosophically, but he believed there was like a first cause, but he was not a Christian until late in his life, and he became a Catholic. Actually, died in his 90s, back in the 90s, early 2000s. He actually wrote a book called How to Speak and How to Listen.
Really?
Yes.
Is it good?
It's on my shelf. Like many of the books on my shelf.
You haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it. But as you were speaking, The Art of Conversation, I'm like, because that was like, of course, you know me. I'm like, what's the perfect book for this?
Yes.
And Adler was a brilliant man, and he recognized the importance, because one of his most well-known books is How to Read a Book. But he realized that's one form of communication, but you also have to how to speak and how to listen.
And how to engage.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I totally want to read it.
The other thing I thought of in terms of, why attentiveness to psychology and so on, as you were talking about grace building on nature, we share the same spiritual director, and he talks about the acronym of HALT. Do you remember HALT? I forgot it for a while.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yeah. So how we have to really be attentive when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So our physical and psychological status in terms of the enemy could pounce at those times.
Yes.
And oftentimes does.
Yes.
So that kind of gets into the other piece that I want to talk about. But if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Ignition. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, visiting today with Emily Leedom about the importance of human formation as a disciple of Jesus Christ. So, self-awareness as really one of the key things when it comes to human formation. Yes. So you're nodding, you wrote it down. Yes. Tell us.
Oh, what is that quote from
Pope St. Gregory the Great?
No, Teresa of Avila.
Oh, yeah.
That self-awareness is or self-knowledge is so important. Something, let us never grow tired of the cultivation of it.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
She has a quote. I don't know it as well as Gregory's, but yes.
It's something. What's Gregory's?
The greatest obstacle to ministry is the lack of self-awareness.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Yep.
Yes. So basically what these two great saints are getting at is that self-knowledge or self-awareness is critical to our ability to grow as disciples, critical to our ability to be evangelists, to share the faith with others, critical to our ability to navigate the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever met someone that just really does not have self-awareness?
Mm-hmm.
That's just, they're a bit aloof. I actually find these people kind of endearing sometimes because really they're almost just unfazed by things in a certain capacity because they're like, oh, I'm just doing my thing, or you have the other side where they are maybe really strongly opinionated, intense people. Why are you laughing, Chris? Does it sound familiar to you?
Maybe a little bit.
I'm really proud of you for growing.
Thank you very much.
Skill of self-awareness.
Yes.
But self-awareness helps us to regulate those aspects that are perhaps natural to our personality that inhibit us or decrease our ability to be virtuous or our ability to engage well with the world in which we live. So, I think self-awareness is one of the most critical, key, foundational elements for human growth. That's why things like journaling are really important, or having close friendships. Close friendships, if they are authentically virtuous friendships, actually bring about greater self-awareness for us.
Why? How?
Gosh, so what's a good example? I have a friend that I talk to regularly, probably 3-4 times a week via phone, and then every other couple weeks we go out for coffee or whatever. This is somebody that knows me really intimately, knows me really well. There are many conversations that I have had with her that she will ask a question and I will say, why do I do it that way? Gosh, why am I thinking about this thing? What is my motivation? What is my fear? What is my hesitancy here? Whatever. So I think authentic friendship can develop questions almost for ourselves that make us. So, and you and I have had many of these. That I walk away from a conversation with you thinking or growing with a new recognition about myself, about my tendencies, about my personality, etc. So I think good friendship can do this, but it ultimately allows us, like I said earlier, to kind of rein in those elements of our personality that are vice, that are not caring or compassionate or virtuous, and to cultivate those things that are. Why are you smirking?
So part of self-awareness is knowing personality, and there's 1,000 different approaches to personality, and the one that I feel like the best are the 4 temperaments.
Yep.
And I think I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a choleric sanguine, I think. So our Jermaine and I, our old Elena's a junior this year when she's a sophomore. So last year in high school, in one of her classes, they were doing something in the temperaments, and there was an online quiz or inventory. And she brought it home. We were talking about it, Jermaine, my wife, and Elena, our oldest, and me. And so I took it, and I'm a choleric sanguine, and it's going through the strengths and the weaknesses. And I'm reading the weaknesses, and I'm like, what's the problem? Like, no, I know.
Yeah, you were messing with them.
But a choleric sanguine is like, well, these are actually fantastic.
Deal with it.
These all belong in the strengths.
Yes.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Yes. Yeah, that whole, like, they could be a bit of a bulldozer. Or,
So there was probably a time
dictator.
where it would have been like, well, no, these aren't weaknesses. They're strengths. Now I say that in jest because I know they are weaknesses because I've grown in self-awareness and I can see how it's
Right.
they've impeded my ability to relate. So the example I often give, my personality, for some people I know it's too much and I need to dial me down.
Sure.
So I can build a bridge.
That's that's a great example. One of the examples that I would share is I'm a sanguine, primarily.
Right.
A sanguine phlegmatic. Sanguines get really excited about things for short periods of time, and then they tend to lose interest. So I can play like 2 notes on probably 10 different instruments. But can I play a song on any of them? No. Sure. Besides Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but I don't mean to toot my own horn. I struggle following through. I struggle to commit to finishing something all the way through. The growth in self-awareness for me has allowed me to say, okay, here's where I need to push a little harder, because my natural tendency is going to be to whatever.
Right.
It'll work itself out.
Right.
Something will happen eventually, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's this challenge, I think, that comes with self-awareness to really be able to better engage the places where we want to grow in virtue. Right.
So we could go either of 2 ways. I'm going to leave it to you. If there's other things that you really want us to get into, we've only got about 6 minutes left.
Okay.
But I'm also, so how do I grow in self-awareness? You already talked about, but are there other things, but I don't know if there's other key things about human formation that you feel like we should maybe take some time on.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of wrap them into 2, actually. There's a couple of things that come to my mind, particularly with your second question. What are some things that we can do to grow in human formation? Obviously, establish friendships, create close friendships. Community really allows us to do this well. Community often is a chisel for us that reveals to us those little rough spots where we need to be smoothed out, if you will. So I think to engage in community well is really important. I would say counseling as well. Oftentimes people think of counseling as only for those that are going through major crisis or that are experiencing a level of depression or anxiety or loss or major rupture point. Increasingly, there's a common thread or a common kind of effort within the counseling field of growth counseling.
Yeah.
That individuals say, I'm doing okay, I'm doing well, but I just recognize there's some areas that I want to grow. I spend too much time on my phone. I feel a little too disengaged with my children. I feel like I'm struggling to balance work and my home life. That's something that counseling can help with, to name what are those things that you want to grow, and then to set some plans in place. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be in counseling for 2 years for some of those things, but just a few checkup points to say, here's some things that I want to work on comes to my mind. The other really critical component, and why I said I want to combine the 2 of your questions of how do you grow in this and are there other key elements of human formation? Leadership. Training, reading about leadership, watching and studying effective leaders, I think has the capacity to be one of the best formation tools for us. Reading good books about leadership or, I don't even know, just diving into listening to podcasts about it, etc. I think that starts to reveal the greater self-awareness for us of what type of follower are we, what type of leader are we, that kind of thing. But it's also a really critical part of human formation, that not everybody is going to be a leader in every sense or in every place, but there's certain environments where we might be called to step up as a leader in our family or maybe in our friendship group for something, in our community, that sort of thing. And I think leadership has a really profound way of helping us to grow in human formation. It gets us out of our comfort zone a little bit. And it's a real critical aspect of human formation, and it's a way that we can grow, I think, as humans too.
So self-awareness, we talked earlier about virtue and the things you were just detailing there. We talked about personality a little bit. We've got about 3 minutes left. Do you want to capstone it, or is there some other key component that you think we still need to touch on?
One of the other, this is maybe the last one that I'll share. We talked about relationality and all of that, but receiving criticism is a crucial part of human formation. And it's, I think, the most difficult one to master. If my husband, has a comment, perhaps, about a way that he feels like I could grow, what's my natural tendency?
Yeah.
Typically, well, you don't do this, or
Right.
blah, blah, blah. I want to bite back, right?
Yep.
Defensive. The defense wall goes up. But at times when I have been able to really readily receive criticism, oh man, the growth is palpable and it continues to bear fruit. So I think that's just one other element.
And that goes back to surrounding yourself, and maybe you're a person who you just have a few really close friends. Maybe you got a lot of friends, regardless, but a community around you. We talked about that earlier, of people who basically you've given permission to speak truth into your life.
Yes.
I think, Emily, there's no easy way. You just have to do it.
Yes.
Like in terms of receiving. How do I grow? Yes. The question, how do I grow in my ability to receive criticism? By asking for it and receiving it.
Yes. And praying for the gift to receive it as well. And from the Lord too. The Lord wants to challenge us. The Lord wants, so the examine.
Yep.
Really, if we get into the regular practice of an examine every night, there's a critical part of the examine of, Lord, where have I failed you today?
Right.
Blah.
Amen.
That's a hard question.
Right.
But that really is getting us in the practice of being able to receive. And don't get me wrong, it's not like the Lord saying, oh, how dare you, or anything like that. But we're receiving the critically, or receiving the critical reality of where we fail.
Yep.
Of where we are human.
And we have to know that so that we can continue on the road from healthiness to holiness.
And do better tomorrow.
Emily, if only there were a podcast where I could learn more about human formation.
I don't know
if
any.
only that existed.
I don't know any. We talk a lot about this on Leedham to Life.
So Leedham to Life, tell us just briefly about your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been going on about a year, and really Leedham to Life is an effort to engage the human realities that all of us experience, to find a common experience, but in and through the Catholic vision of the human person, through the Catholic lens. So we talk about any and all aspects. We did one on pelvic floor. Did you listen to that one? It was really good.
I did not.
Bill listened to it. He was like, well, that was new.
And on that
But to talk about the human experience.
So you can find it everywhere you subscribe to podcasts.
You bet.
The Diocesan website, Leedham to Life. Emily, thanks for being here today.
Thanks.
And that will wrap up this episode of Ignition. Again, you can email us, ignition@sfcatholic.org, with any thoughts, questions, or ideas for future episodes. And until next time, may God bless you.